The night sky was filled with smoke. Shadows of tall alien buildings leaned over the crowded market street. Merchants shouted in panic, mothers pulled their children close, and raiders stormed through the stalls with fire and blades. Screams echoed in the air. The marketplace that once smelled of spices and roasted food now smelled only of blood and fear. In the middle of this chaos, an alien mother held her young daughter tight. The girl's eyes were wide, glowing faintly in the darkness, and her small hands clutched her mother's torn cloak. The mother's heart beat fast. She only thought of one thing: protect her child at any cost. Behind them, raiders shouted, their heavy boots striking the ground like drums of war. The mother tried to run, pushing through broken stalls and burning cloth. The daughter cried out, "Mama, I'm scared," the mother whispered. "Don't let go, my star. Don't let go." Her words were strong, but her steps were slowing. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but still she pushed forward. Then it happened. A sharp sound cut through the smoke-filled air, the whistle of an arrow. The mother turned just in time to shield her daughter. The arrow struck her side, piercing deep. Her cry filled the night as she collapsed to the ground, arms still wrapped tightly around her daughter. The girl screamed for help, but no one stopped. Everyone was running. No one dared to save them. The raiders laughed, their cruel voices echoing as they moved closer. One raised his spear, pointing at the little girl. The child froze, shaking, her tears falling onto her mother's pale face. The mother whispered with her last strength, "Run, my star." But the girl could not move. Her small body shook as she clung to her mother's hand, refusing to leave. And then a new sound, footsteps heavy but calm. Out of the smoke stepped a man, not an alien, but a human, tall, rough from travel, with dirt on his clothes and scars across his arms. His eyes scanned the scene quickly, the fallen mother, the terrified child, the raiders ready to strike. The raiders sneered, "A human? What's he doing here?" They laughed, thinking he would turn away like all the others. But the human did not turn away. He moved forward, his jaw tight, his fist clenched. The child looked up at him with desperate eyes, and something inside him hardened. He could not walk away, not this time. The human stepped between the raiders and the fallen mother. The girl's small cry echoed, "Please, save my mama." The raiders mocked him. Waving their weapons, one shouted, "Go home, off-worlder. This is none of your fight." But the human didn't answer with words. Instead, he picked up a broken piece of wood from a ruined stall. Holding it like a staff, his stance was steady, his eyes burning with resolve. The mother, half-conscious, opened her eyes and gasped. She whispered, Why would a human?" Before her voice faded again, the raiders advanced, circling him. The human's heart pounded. But he stood tall. He had faced danger before. He had survived wars, but something about the sight of that little girl clutching her mother gave him a strength deeper than fear. He thought, "If I fall, she dies," so he did not move. The air grew heavy. The firelight flickered against his face. The girl hid behind him, peeking out with trembling eyes. Her small voice whispered again, "Don't leave us." The human glanced back only once, giving her a small nod. Then he raised the wooden staff, ready to fight. One raider lunged. The human struck him across the jaw. Another came from the side, but the human kicked him back. The raiders hissed in anger, surprised that a single man dared resist them. The girl gasped, amazed. The mother tried to lift her head, her vision blurry, watching this stranger fight for them. Still, the raiders pressed harder. The human fought with speed, not strength, dodging, using every trick. But he knew he could not fight them all, not like this. His eyes darted around the marketplace, searching for a way out. There, a narrow alley half-blocked with debris. It was risky, but it was their only chance. He swung the staff again, knocking another raider down. Then he dropped the wood and rushed back to the mother. He lifted her into his arms. Heavy and bleeding, the girl cried, "Don't drop her, please." The human grunted, "Hold on tight, little one." The girl wrapped her arms around his neck, clinging as he carried both of them. Arrows flew again, one slicing across his arm. But he didn't stop. He pushed forward into the alley, kicking aside crates, leaping over fallen beams. The raiders shouted behind them, their voices growing angrier, but the human ran faster, determination burning in his chest. He would not let them die, not tonight. The alley twisted, dark and narrow, filled with smoke. His lungs burned, but he kept going. The girl buried her face in his shoulder, whispering through her sobs, "Thank you, thank you." The mother's weak hand clutched his torn shirt, her blood staining him. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Why would you save us?" The human didn't answer. He only ran. Because in his heart he knew he could not abandon them, and so, through fire and shadow, the human carried them into the unknown night. The chase had only just begun. The night pressed heavy against the burning market. Flames licked the sky while smoke twisted through every broken stall. The human's breath came sharp and fast as he ran, carrying the alien mother in his arms and the little girl clinging to his shoulder. Her tiny fingers dug into his torn shirt, her face buried against his neck. The mother was weak, her eyes half closed, whispering words he could barely hear behind them. The sound of boots struck like thunder. The raiders shouted, their voices filled with rage and hunger. One called out, "The child." "Don't let them escape," another hissed. "Kill the human. Take the mother as an example." Their steps grew closer, echoing down the stone walls of the alley. The human turned sharply into a side path, his boots splashing through muddy water. He pressed his body against the shadows, trying to stay hidden. But the girl's frightened sob slipped out, echoing louder than she intended. The raiders stopped, their ears sharp. A voice growled, "They're close." The human clenched his jaw, pushing forward. Every step felt like carrying the weight of a mountain, but he refused to let them fall. His eyes darted across the ruined street ahead, shattered carts, fallen beams and broken pottery. He thought fast, his mind searching for earth tricks that could buy them a little more time. He set the mother down gently against a crumbling wall, then grabbed one of the broken beams. He pulled it across the narrow path, stacking rubble to form a barrier. The little girl whispered, "What are you doing?" He answered softly, "Slowing them down, that's all." His voice was calm, but inside he felt the fear clawing at him. The girl nodded, her eyes wide, her trust growing stronger with every second. The mother tried to move, coughing weakly. "Leave me." "Take her and go," she whispered, her voice breaking. But the human shook his head sharply. "No, I'm not leaving either of you," he said, his words steady. The girl's small hand gripped her mother's, whispering, "Don't say that, Mama. Please." The sound of steel striking stone rang out. The raiders had reached the barrier. Hacking at it with their blades, the human's heart raced. He knew the wall would not hold long. He lifted the mother again, ignoring the sting of pain in his arm where an arrow had cut him earlier. The girl clung tighter, her face wet with tears. They ran deeper into the winding alleys, every turn twisted into darker shadows, every corner filled with the unknown. The raiders followed, their shouts bouncing off the walls. But the human kept moving, faster, sharper, like a hunted wolf refusing to die. He spotted an overturned stall of spice jars. The glass cracked and scattered, a thought sparked in his mind. He grabbed one jar and smashed it across the ground, the powder filling the air like a thick cloud. Cinnamon, fire dust, and pepper mixed together, creating a choking fog. The raiders behind coughed and cursed, their eyes stinging, their vision blurred. The human used the moment to slip further ahead, carrying the mother and guiding the girl with his arm. The girl whispered, "How did you know that would work?" He gave her a small, tired smile. "On Earth, we use every trick to survive." She blinked, not fully understanding. But she held tighter to him for the first time. She felt like maybe, just maybe, they could live. Finally, they stumbled into a broken courtyard. The walls were cracked, the fountain dry, the stones covered in moss. The human placed the mother down gently near the fountain's edge. She groaned, clutching her wound, her skin pale and damp with sweat. The human tore a strip of cloth from his shirt and pressed it against the bleeding. The mother gasped, her eyes filling with both pain and disbelief. You should have left us. Why risk your life?" she whispered. The human didn't answer immediately. He only tightened the cloth, forcing the bleeding to slow. Then he looked at her and said, "Because no one deserves to die like this. Not while I can still stand." The little girl knelt beside her mother, her hand stroking her hair. Her voice cracked. "Mama, he's helping. He's saving you." The mother's eyes softened as she looked at the human. In her world, humans were strangers, often feared, sometimes hated. Yet this one carried them through fire and arrows without hesitation. The raiders' voices echoed again in the distance. The human's head snapped up, his instincts sharp. "They're not giving up," he muttered. He looked at the girl. "Can you walk if I carry your mother?" The girl nodded bravely, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. The human stood tall, lifting the mother once again. His muscles ached, his wounds stung, but his eyes were steady. The girl walked beside him, her small hand clutching his sleeve. Together they moved into the darkness, searching for a place where the raiders could not follow. The night stretched on, the fire still burned behind them, but ahead, there was still hope. The broken courtyard was silent except for the crackle of distant fire. The raiders' shouts had faded for the moment, but the danger still lingered in the air. The human lowered the alien mother gently onto the cold stones near the fountain. Her face was pale, her breath shallow, her blood soaking through the torn cloth he had pressed against her side. The little girl knelt beside her, tears glistening on her cheeks, whispering, "Mama, don't leave me." The human's eyes moved quickly, searching the area for anything useful. The courtyard was old, abandoned, covered with dust and broken wood. A pile of pottery lay shattered in one corner, and vines crept across the wall. He spotted an old bucket near the dry fountain, half filled with rainwater. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He dipped a piece of cloth into the water, then returned to the mother's side. The wound was deep. The arrowhead had pierced muscle and torn flesh. If it wasn't treated, she would not last the night. The human's hands were rough from years of work and battle, yet when he touched the wound, his movements were careful, almost gentle. The girl watched him with wide eyes, amazed at how steady he seemed. The mother winced in pain, her voice trembling. "Stop. Don't waste your time." Her hand weakly tried to push him away. The human shook his head firmly. "If I don't, you'll bleed out. And I won't let that happen." The little girl clutched her mother's arm. "Mama, please let him help." The mother's eyes softened, filled with exhaustion, and finally she let her hand fall. The human broke the arrow's shaft with a sharp snap. The mother gasped, her body shaking. "Breathe," he said calmly, his voice low and steady. "Stay with me." He pressed the wet cloth against her wound. Cleaning away dirt and blood, the water turned dark red, dripping across his fingers. He knew he needed fire to seal it. His eyes scanned again. Landing on a pile of broken beams, he pulled a small flintstone from his pocket, an old earth tool he always carried. Striking it against metal, sparks flew, catching dry wood and broken cloth. A small flame flickered to life. Glowing in the courtyard, the girl gasped softly, her eyes wide as she watched the fire. The human took a metal shard, holding it in the flame until it glowed red. The mother saw and realized what he intended. Her eyes widened in fear. "No, don't," she whispered. But the human looked at her firmly. "It's the only way to stop the bleeding. You'll survive this." He looked at the girl. "Hold her hand." "Don't let go." The child nodded quickly, clutching her mother's trembling fingers. The mother bit down on her lip, her body tense. The human pressed the hot metal to the wound. The air filled with the sharp hiss of burning flesh, and the mother cried out, her voice echoing through the night. The girl sobbed but held on tightly, whispering, "Stay, Mama, stay." The human's face was hard, focused, though his own hands shook from the memory of battles long past. He had done this before, too many times, but it never grew easier. Finally, the bleeding slowed, the wound sealed, and the mother's body sagged back against the stones. Exhausted, her breath came shallow but steady now. The human poured a little water on the cloth and placed it against her forehead, cooling her. "She'll live," he said quietly, his voice carrying both relief and exhaustion. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with gratitude. "You saved her," she whispered, almost in awe. The human gave a small nod. "For now, but she needs rest." The mother opened her eyes weakly, her voice soft. Why would a human risk everything for us?" The human looked away for a moment, his jaw tight. He thought of Earth, of the wars, of the children he had once seen cry in burning streets just like this. Finally, he said, "Because no one should watch their child lose hope." The mother's eyes filled with tears, silent but heavy with meaning. The girl crawled closer to him, her small voice trembling. "You're different. You're not like the others Mama told me about." He gave her a faint smile. "Maybe not all stories are true." She hugged his arm suddenly, surprising him, her small frame pressing against his side. He froze for a moment, then let out a slow breath. Her trust was something he hadn't expected, but it warmed something long cold inside him. The fire crackled, casting long shadows against the courtyard walls. The night grew colder, but inside the small circle of firelight, a fragile safety formed. The human sat against the wall, his body aching, his wounds stinging. The girl curled beside her mother, holding her hand tightly. The mother's eyes drifted shut, her breathing even and calm for the first time since the arrow struck. The human stayed awake, watching the flames. His mind was alert, listening for footsteps, for danger, for the raiders' return, but deep inside, another thought stirred. He had saved strangers before, but this felt different. This time it wasn't just survival. It was the beginning of something he could not yet name. And so, under the watch of the dying fire, the human kept guard. His healing hands had bought them time. But the night was far from over. In the silence, the little girl's whisper drifted through the air. "Don't leave us," she said softly. Before sleep claimed her, the human looked at her, his jaw firm, and whispered back, "I won't." The night was long. The flames from the distant market still painted the sky with a red glow. The human sat awake, his back against the cracked wall, his eyes fixed on the dark alleyways around them. Every sound, every creak of wood, every gust of wind felt like a warning that the raiders might return. Beside him, the alien mother slept weakly, her wound bandaged and sealed, her breath shallow but steady. The little girl curled at her mother's side, her tiny hands still clutching her cloak, her face pressed against her chest. The human's body ached. His arm throbbed from the cut of the arrow, his muscles stiff from carrying them for so long. Yet he did not rest. Something deeper than duty held him awake. It was the memory of the girl's desperate eyes when she whispered, "Please save my mama." It was the memory of the mother shielding her daughter even as the arrow struck. Hours passed slowly. Finally, the girl stirred, her bright eyes blinking open. She looked around, confused at first, then calmed when she saw the human still sitting there. Watching the shadows, her small voice broke the silence. "You didn't leave." The human turned his head, his expression unreadable. "I said I wouldn't." The girl sat up quietly, hugging her knees. She studied him with a gaze too old for her young age. "Mama always told me, humans only care for themselves," she whispered. Her voice shook, like she wasn't sure if she should believe her own words anymore. The human looked at her for a long moment, then replied softly, "Maybe your mama was wrong. Or maybe I'm the exception." The girl tilted her head. Curious, she edged closer, sitting near him, her small fingers brushing the hem of his torn shirt. "You fought them," she said, her voice filled with awe. "They had blades and arrows, but you didn't run." The human gave a faint, tired smile. "I've run enough in my life." His eyes softened. "This time, I couldn't." The girl was quiet for a moment, staring into the flickering firelight. Finally, she asked, "Why us?" The human's gaze shifted to the mother, lying weakly but safe beside them. "Because she chose to protect you with her life," he said slowly. "And I couldn't let that sacrifice be for nothing." The girl's throat tightened. Her small hands clenched and she whispered, "She's all I have." Her voice cracked, tears brimming in her eyes. The human looked at her, his jaw firm, and said, "Then we'll make sure she lives." The girl blinked, surprised by the word "we" for the first time. She felt they were not alone anymore. She leaned her head against his arm cautiously, and he didn't pull away. In the distance, faint voices echoed. The raiders were still searching, their torches flickering like angry fireflies in the night. The human stiffened, his hand tightening on the broken spear he had kept. The girl felt his tension and whispered, "Will they find us?" The human looked into the dark and answered honestly, "Maybe. But if they do, I'll stand in their way again." The girl's heart raced. But instead of fear, she felt something new, trust. She clung tighter to his arm, whispering, "You're not like the others, are you?" The human's voice was low. "No, I've always been different." The girl smiled faintly, her tears drying on her cheeks. The mother stirred then, her eyes opening slowly. She winced in pain but managed to whisper, You stayed." The human leaned closer, pressing a damp cloth to her forehead. "I wasn't going anywhere," he said calmly. Her eyes filled with confusion and something else. Reluctant gratitude, she turned her gaze to her daughter, who clung to the human's arm. Her heart ached at the sight, but also softened. In her culture, humans were untrusted, even despised. Yet here one sat, guarding them with his own life. She whispered, "Why do you risk so much for us, stranger?" The human looked at her, his eyes shadowed by firelight. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything," he answered quietly. His voice carried the weight of memories, of battles and graves left behind on earth. The mother's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she closed her eyes, letting exhaustion pull her back into rest. The girl watched silently, then looked back at him. Her voice was small but steady. "You won't let her die, right?" The human shook his head slowly. "Not while I can still fight." The girl's eyes shone, and she whispered something she had never said to a human before. "Then I trust you." The word struck him harder than he expected. He sat in silence, staring at the small child who had placed her fragile hope in him. He felt something shift inside, a bond forming. Not by choice, but by need, he reached out, brushing her tangled hair gently from her face. "You should rest too," he said softly. The girl nodded, laying down beside her mother once more. Her small hand reached out in the dark, searching. The human hesitated, then let her tiny fingers wrap around his calloused hand. She sighed, her eyes closing, her breathing slowing. The bond was sealed, fragile yet unbreakable. The fire burned lower, the night stretched on, and danger still lingered in the shadows, but something had changed. They were no longer strangers, no longer just a human, a wounded mother and a frightened child. They had become something else, something stronger. A fragile trust had been born in the heart of fire and fear, and in that trust, hope began to grow. The sky was beginning to pale, a faint silver glow cutting through the smoke. The human had not slept, his eyes sharp and restless, every sense tuned to the night. Beside him, the alien mother still rested, her breathing slow but steady, her wound wrapped tight in cloth. The little girl clung to her mother's arm, though her small hand still reached toward the human's sleeve. Even in sleep, for a short while, the courtyard had felt safe. A fragile bubble of peace in the middle of chaos. But peace never lasted long. The human's ears caught it first, the faint crunch of boots on stone, the murmur of low voices. His body stiffened, his hand moving instinctively to the broken spear at his side. The girl stirred awake, sensing his tension, her wide eyes blinking open. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The human raised a finger to his lips, his eyes fixed on the shadows. Then it came, flickers of orange light against the wall, torches. The raiders had returned. The mother's eyes fluttered open at the sound. Fear flashed across her pale face. "They've found us," she whispered weakly, trying to push herself upright. The human pressed her gently back down. "Stay still. You'll reopen the wound." He stood tall, his broad frame outlined against the dying firelight. His voice was steady, almost cold. "If they want us, they'll have to go through me." The girl's small hand grabbed his wrist. "Desperate, there's too many," she whispered, her eyes filling with fear. The human looked down at her, his gaze softening for just a moment. "Then we don't fight with strength, we fight with our minds," he said. He glanced around the courtyard quickly, every broken piece of wood, every loose stone, every shadow becoming a weapon in his thoughts. The raiders spilled into the courtyard, their faces twisted with cruel smiles. Their leader stepped forward, his armor cracked but his posture strong. "There he is, the human fool who thinks he can protect them," the leader growled. He pointed at the mother with his blade. "Give her to us, and maybe we'll let you live." The human didn't flinch, didn't move. He raised the broken spear in his hands, his stance firm. "You'll get none of them," he said flatly. The raiders laughed, their voices cruel and echoing through the broken walls. The girl trembled, but she remembered his words. "Fight with our minds." Her eyes darted to the fire pit, to the pile of broken jars still scattered near the wall. She tugged on his sleeve, whispering, "The jars." The human's eyes followed her gaze, and a plan sparked. He gave her a small nod. When the raiders charged, the human moved first. He swung the spear low, knocking two off balance at the same time. The girl darted forward and kicked one of the jars into the fire. The flames flared high, sparks exploding as powdered spice caught in the air. The sudden burst of light blinded the raiders, who stumbled back with curses. The human struck again, fast and sharp, using the confusion. One raider lunged, but the human sidestepped, grabbing him by the arm and throwing him hard into the fountain. Another came from behind. Blade raised, the girl shouted, "Behind you!" The human turned just in time, blocking with the shaft of the spear, the impact sending a jolt through his arms. He pushed back hard, the raider stumbling into the flames. The courtyard became chaos. The raiders shouted orders, but the human kept moving. Never still. He ducked under blades, used the walls to push off and strike from angles they didn't expect. Every move was desperate but clever, born from survival. The girl grabbed loose stones and hurled them, small but distracting, giving him precious moments. The mother, weak but awake, watched in disbelief. Her vision swam, but she could see the human fighting like no one she had ever seen, not with brute strength but with stubborn will, refusing to fall. Her heart clenched as she realized he wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for them. The raiders grew angrier. Their leader pushing through, he raised his blade and roared, charging straight at the human. The human braced, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. The leader was strong, heavier, but the human moved with speed. Striking low, forcing him back, they circled each other, every strike echoing through the courtyard. The girl's eyes widened as she saw another raider creeping behind the human. Blade raised, without thinking, she screamed, "Now!" The human reacted instantly, dropping low as the hidden raider swung. The blade struck the leader instead, cutting across his shoulder. The leader roared in pain, stumbling. The human seized the moment, slamming the spear shaft into his chest, knocking him to the ground. Silence followed for a heartbeat. The other raiders hesitated, glancing between their fallen leader and the human who stood tall, panting, blood on his arms but fire in his eyes. The human growled, his voice like iron. "You'll take another step, and none of you leave alive." The raiders exchanged uneasy glances, their courage cracking. Finally one shouted, "Fall back." And just like that, the raiders melted into the shadows, dragging their wounded leader with them. The courtyard was quiet again, the fire crackling weakly. The human stood trembling, his body aching, blood dripping from a cut across his shoulder. The girl ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "You did it," she cried, her voice breaking. He rested a hand gently on her head, his breath rough. "We did it," he corrected behind them. The mother whispered weakly, "You saved us." Again, the human looked at her, his jaw tight, but his eyes softened. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "They'll come again, and we need to be ready." The girl looked up at him, her trust unshaken, her voice steady despite her fear. "Then we'll face them together." And in that moment, under the first light of dawn, the bond between them was no longer fragile. It was unbreakable. The dawn crept over the ruined city, painting the broken walls with pale light. Smoke still lingered in the air, and the scent of ash clung to every stone. The human sat against the courtyard wall, his chest rising heavy, his wounds stinging from the fight. The broken spear rested across his lap, blood still dripping from the wood beside him. The alien mother lay weak but alive, her breathing steady and pressed against his side. The little girl clung to him, refusing to let go. For a moment, silence held them. The raiders had fled, but the human knew it was only a matter of time before they returned. He stared at the empty alleys, his mind already planning. He would need more than a spear, more than tricks if he wanted to keep them safe. The girl sensed his thoughts, her small voice cutting through the silence. "You'll protect us again, won't you?" she whispered. The human looked down at her, his expression tired but firm. "Yes, as long as I can stand." The mother stirred, opening her eyes slowly. Her gaze fell on the human, then her daughter. Her lips trembled. "You should. Leave us, stranger. They'll kill you if you stay." The human shook his head, his jaw tightening. "I don't run from cowards who hunt children," he said coldly. The girl gripped her mother's hand tightly. "Mama, don't say that. We need him." The mother's eyes softened, though pain and pride still battled inside her. Before they could speak more, a sharp sound split the air. The crunch of boots, the clatter of steel. The raiders had returned faster than expected, their voices rising in cruel laughter. The human's body tensed, his hand tightening on the spear. He pulled himself to his feet. Though his legs trembled from exhaustion, the girl gasped. They're back. The mother reached for her daughter, whispering, "Hide, Star, hide!" But the girl froze, torn between fear and something stronger. She looked at the human, saw the blood on his arms, the exhaustion in his face. He had saved them again and again, and now he stood ready to fight once more. Even if it killed him, her heart pounded, her small fists clenched. She knew she had a choice: stay hidden like her mother begged, or stand beside the human who refused to abandon them. The raiders poured into the courtyard, their torches blazing, their leader, wounded from before, snarled with fury. "This time the human dies." The human raised his spear, his voice steady despite the fear burning in his chest. "Then come and try," he growled. The girl stepped forward suddenly, planting herself at his side. Her mother gasped, "No, stay back!" But the girl shook her head, her voice strong. No, Mama, I won't hide. Not anymore. The human glanced at her in surprise. Her small frame trembled, but her eyes blazed with courage. He saw himself in her. Defiance against fear. The refusal to surrender, he whispered low. Stay close. Do what I say. She nodded firmly, her trust complete. The fight erupted. Raiders charged, blades flashing in the pale morning light. The human swung the spear, blocking one strike, kicking another raider back. The girl darted forward, her hands grabbing loose stones from the ground. She hurled them with all her strength. Striking one raider in the face, it wasn't much, but it bought the human precious moments. Another raider lunged at the girl. His blade raised, the mother cried out in terror. But the human moved faster, shoving the raider aside with a brutal strike. The girl stumbled, then looked up at him. Her eyes filled with tears. He shouted, "Stay behind me." But she shook her head, her voice trembling but strong. No, I can help. She picked up a broken jar from the ground. Swinging it at another raider's legs, the man stumbled, and the human finished him with a swift strike. The girl's chest heaved, her fear mixing with pride. The mother's eyes filled with shock. Her daughter was no longer just a child hiding in fear. She was choosing to fight to survive. The leader roared, charging again. The human braced, but his arms trembled from exhaustion. The blade slashed across his shoulder, blood spraying. He staggered. Nearly falling, the girl screamed, "No!" Without thinking, she ran forward, throwing herself against the leader's leg. Her small body wasn't strong, but it was enough to trip him for a split second. That split second was all the human needed. With a cry, he drove the broken spear into the leader's chest. The raider fell back, choking, his weapon clattering to the ground. The other raiders froze. Their courage breaking again, they backed away, dragging their leader with them, shouting curses as they fled into the shadows once more. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the sound of the human's ragged breathing. He fell to one knee, blood dripping from his shoulder. The girl rushed to him, throwing her arms around him, sobbing, "Don't fall, please don't fall." The mother, weak but awake, whispered through tears, "You saved us." "Both of you." The human looked at the girl, his voice hoarse. "You were brave. Too brave." She shook her head, tears streaking her face. "No, I just didn't want you to die," she whispered. The human pulled her close with his good arm, his voice low. "Then you made the right choice." The mother watched them, her heart breaking and healing all at once. For the first time, she saw her daughter not just as a frightened child, but as someone willing to fight for those she loved. The girl clung to the human, whispering, "We're family now, aren't we?" The human hesitated, his throat tight, then nodded slowly. "Yes," he said softly, "we are." The morning sun broke through the smoke, its golden light spilling over the ruined courtyard. The battle was over. The raiders had fled into the shadows, leaving behind only silence and blood. The human knelt on the cold stones, his chest rising and falling with every heavy breath. Blood stained his shirt, dripping from the deep cut across his shoulder. His hands trembled from exhaustion, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the alleys for any sign of return. Beside him, the little girl clung to his arm, her face streaked with tears and ash. Her small voice whispered, "Don't leave us. Please don't leave us." The human turned his head. Meeting her wide, desperate eyes, he gave her a faint, tired smile. "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly. The girl pressed her face against his side, her grip tightening. The alien mother struggled to sit up, her wound bound but still painful. She leaned against the broken fountain, her gaze fixed on the human. Her voice was weak but steady. "You fought like no one I've ever seen." The human shook his head slowly. "I only fought because I had to." His eyes softened as he looked at her and the girl. "Because you're worth fighting for." The mother's lips trembled, her chest tightening with emotions she couldn't name. In her culture, humans were strangers, outsiders, often distrusted. But this man had carried her through fire, healed her wounds, and risked his life again and again for her and her child. She whispered, "I was wrong. Not all humans are cruel." Her eyes filled with tears. "You saved not just my life, but hers. My daughter's hope." The girl turned toward her mother, clutching her hand. "Mama, he's part of us now," she said firmly, her voice strong despite her fear. The mother looked at her daughter, then at the human. Her heart ached, but also felt lighter than it had in years. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes, he is." The human lowered himself to sit beside them, the pain in his body pulling at every movement. For the first time since the chaos began, he allowed himself to breathe. The girl leaned against him, her head resting on his chest. The mother's eyes softened as she saw the sight. Her child safe in the arms of a man she had once been told to fear. The world had changed in a single night, but danger still lingered. The human knew the raiders would not stop forever. He would need to move them to safety, find shelter, find allies. Yet as he looked at the girl's small, trusting smile, and the mother's quiet, grateful gaze, he felt something deeper than duty. He felt belonging, something he had lost long ago. The girl broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "You're not just our protector," she whispered. "You're our family." The word struck him harder than any blade. His throat tightened, his chest heavy with emotions he had buried for years. He placed a hand gently on her head, whispering, "Then I'll protect this family until my last breath." The mother's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "I owe you everything." The human shook his head, his voice firm. "You owe me nothing." He looked at her wound, the blood still seeping faintly through the cloth. "You just need to heal for her," he said, nodding at the girl. The mother's heart swelled with both gratitude and sorrow, knowing she could never repay what he had done. The sun climbed higher, washing the broken city in light. Birds scattered across the rooftops, their wings flashing silver against the sky. The human stood slowly, offering his hand to the mother. She hesitated, then placed her trembling fingers in his. He pulled her gently to her feet. Steadying her, the girl stood between them, holding both their hands for the first time. She smiled through her tears, her voice filled with hope. "Now we're safe. Because we're together," she said. The human looked down at her, his heart heavy but full. He whispered, "Together." They began to walk, leaving the courtyard behind. The streets were still dangerous. The raiders still prowled the shadows. But something had changed forever. They were no longer just survivors, no longer strangers thrown together by chance. They were bound by something stronger, forged in fire, in blood, in courage. The human carried the weight of his wounds, but also carried something new. The trust of a child, the gratitude of a mother, and the fragile hope of a future not yet written. For the first time in years, he felt he wasn't walking alone. He glanced at the girl skipping beside him, at the mother leaning on his arm, and he knew the truth. They were his family now. Not by blood, not by origin, but by choice, by sacrifice, by fire. A bond that no arrow, no blade, no raider could ever break. And as the morning sun rose higher, chasing away the shadows, the human walked forward with them, a protector, a savior, and now finally part of something worth living for.